Welcome to Learning to Glow, a show about wellness, skin health, and self-development. I'm your host, Jess. I'm a mom, entrepreneur, and skincare expert. I'm so excited to share tips on how to achieve healthy skin and bring amazing guests in the field of health, fitness, aging gracefully, and personal growth. Let's explore all different ways we can take care of ourselves as women, both inside and out, to truly shine. So let's get glowing. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Learning to Glow podcast. I'm your host, Jess. Thank you so much for being here. I hope everybody's enjoying the new year so far, and I know health and wellness is a big topic of conversation this month. And historically, New Year is a really great time to take a look at tightening things up and making sure that our health is on the right track. And so I am so excited to have this conversation and share this with you today, because we are talking all about women and their health. It is such an important episode for every woman to hear. I have Meghan Rabbitt. She's a health journalist who was commissioned by Maria Shriver to write a powerful new book. And this is all about women's health. And she brings together top doctors, scientists, and experts across every stage of a woman's life, from topics ranging from hormones and menopause to brain health. And it's all about rewriting the outdated rules that we've been taught about our bodies, and especially as it pertains to comparing them to men's. So this episode, we talk about what we need to know to take ownership of our health, like what symptoms do we need to look out for. We talk about specifically perimenopause. We talk about brain health. And we even talk about, which is really interesting, how to find the right doctor, how to show up to our medical appointments so that we can get the most out of them, how we can become prepared, and how to listen to our bodies. And there are so many women who get dismissed when something feels off. So having all of this knowledge empowers us to make sure that we're getting the most out of our visits with our doctors. This conversation is packed with practical tools, mindset shifts, and a lot of insights that will change the way you think about your health and your care. So if you've ever been, felt unheard in a doctor's office or frustrated, this is a great episode for you. Her book is New Rules of Women's Health, and it's out now. It just came out, and I will link it in the show notes. She is fantastic. I really love her. You can follow her at Meghan Rabbitt on social media as well. Thank you guys for being here, and I hope you enjoy this one. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Learning to Glow. Today we have Meghan Rabbitt with us. Welcome to our show. So glad you're here.
I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yay. Well, we're going to be talking about your new book that is coming out. I think it's January, and it's New Rules for Women's Health, of Women's Health. And this is, like I was just saying before we hit record, this is obviously the perfect topic for my listeners. And, we are all learning about how we can improve our health in all the different ways possible. So this is amazing. Before we get into that, and some of the questions I have for you, I'd love if you could introduce yourself and tell us how you got into this work and how the book started. Just tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, I'd love to. So when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a doctor, funny enough. I was I was always fascinated by bodies and our different organs, and so I was on a mission to be a doctor. And then I hit high school biology and chemistry, and I was really loving my English classes and really not thoroughly enjoying my science classes. And I said, maybe I need to switch things up. So I ended up going into college as an English major and was lucky enough to be placed in a journalism class my first semester of freshman year. And at that point, I was hooked. I knew I wanted to tell stories. I knew nonfiction writing was going to be my career. And I started working at the college newspaper. When I graduated college, I knew I wanted to be a feature writer. I didn't want to do hard news. I wanted to tell people's stories. And I think even back then, I knew I wanted to tell women's stories. And so I was lucky enough to land a job at Parenting Magazine, which was Time Inc., owned by Time Inc. at the time. Worked with tremendously talented editors and writers to really hone my craft. And then when I was there for almost 7 years. And then I started freelance writing for a lot of the magazines we all know and have seen on newsstands. So the Oprah magazine, Women's Health, Runner's World, Prevention, really just focusing on what, again, women mostly need to know about our bodies and our health to optimally take care of ourselves. So to close the loop on your question too, the book came about because Maria Shriver actually asked me, she commissioned me to write this book for her imprint, which is called The Open Field, and it's an imprint of Penguin Random House. And she said to me, Megan, I want you to write a manifesto. I want this to be a book that covers everything from puberty through menopause and beyond, because we really don't have one that covers all of those topics. I know I have a copy of Our Bodies Ourselves, which I love, but it really covers what we now know as bikini medicine, our breast health, our gynecologic health, our sexual health. These are important aspects of our health. But what Maria charged me with was also talking about our hearts and our brains and our immune system and our gut, and understanding, after interviewing over 100 of the country's leading experts, what women particularly need to know about what we do know about the sex specific differences between men and women, so that, again, women can say, oh, okay, now I understand a little bit more about the female brain versus the male brain, which helps me take care of my brain.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And we can talk about that later too, about how this is so important to be centered around women, and because we're so different, and how, historically all of the studies, they say, have been focusing on men, and then they gave us that data to do the same things that the men are supposed to do. And so this is so important for us, especially because there's a lot of different things out there and we're confused more than ever. There's so much information. Were you always interested in your health? Like, is this like a personal journey too?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. Yes. And I think as women, sometimes we are conditioned to just focus on other people, to kind of charge through. I'm 46 now. I think my generation was still kind of told, buck up, buttercup, you're fine. And so I was fascinated by my own health journey throughout, while I was growing up and through the years. But at the same time, I think I ignored a lot of symptoms that I probably shouldn't have ignored. And I really just brushed them off. Specifically my menstrual health. I just had really heavy periods for a couple days every month, and I would joke about my monthly hemorrhaging. And I think a lot of women do that. We just say, like, it's annoying, I hate it, but we charge on, and we keep taking care of everyone else in our lives. And so, yeah, I think this book is really also a call to know our bodies so that we can listen to symptoms and better take care of ourselves.
Yeah, instead of saying like, oh, I joke about the same thing because I've always had heavy periods too. And it's like, I call it Niagara Falls. And it's just, when you go and talk to a lot of doctors, or you voice your concerns with some of the issues, a lot of times you just hear that it's normal. And so it's like, kind of, okay, well, I guess this is just what I have to deal with. So, I mean, maybe we could start with hormones, because I feel like this is a topic that you really got into in your book. So tell us a little bit about that. What are some of the things we're not being taught when it comes to our hormones? I mean, this is a podcast where a lot of women are in midlife who are listening, but I mean, I'm 48. I still deal with my cycle. And I think those things are, something that we need to be educated more fully on. So let us know a little bit what you found here.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, as women, we tend to blame our hormones for a lot of things, and our hormones get blamed. We've all heard the phrase like, "Oh, she's so hormonal," and we might even say that about ourselves, like, "Oh, don't mind me, I'm hormonal," right? But oftentimes it's presented in such a derogatory way. Our hormones are blamed for things, yet hormones are amazing when you learn a little bit about how many hormones you have, and generally what they do. We would never blame our hormones for anything anymore. Maybe tie them to certain symptoms we have, but we would revere them and say, wow, these are these little chemical messengers that are constantly working for us. you know? And so I think that's first and foremost is like a little bit of a baseline understanding that as women, there's more to the story than estrogen.
Mm.
And understanding what some of our hormones are can help us really say, okay, let me have an informed conversation with my doctor or my healthcare provider and say, here's what I know, and here are my symptoms. What do you think? And
Mhm.
it's like understanding a little more about hormones helps us have those better conversations so that we're not just ignoring our symptoms and saying, I'm just so hormonal.
Yeah, I know. I'm guilty of that for sure.
We all
Like,
are.
so if you are going through perimenopause, that's a really hot topic right now, and people are talking about that more and more. What are some of the things that you feel like we're just not being told, or it's not common knowledge with women going through this? And I've seen people online talk about, I just didn't know. I had no prep for this. Like, this is something that I got to this certain age and all this stuff hit me and I just had no idea it was coming.
Yeah, I think, luckily we're talking more about it now. I mean, as women are in our age category, I'm sure the algorithm knows it and is feeding you content specifically about the menopause transition and all the different concerns we have. And there's a good side of that, right? Like, I don't know about you, but I can't go to a gathering with women and not talk about it right now. And I'm here for it. Like, let's talk about the symptoms, the hot flashes, the night sweats, the painful sex, the dry vaginas. Like, we have to take what were formerly taboo topics and keep talking about them so that our daughters and nieces and granddaughters are going to think that we were crazy for ever considering them taboo. I think
Mhm.
when it comes to what we're not, so bottom line, we're talking more about a lot of the things we should be talking about. One of the big ahas after I interviewed as many menopause experts as I did for this book is that these doctors really want us to track our symptoms. So, like we track our periods now using apps, which have made it really easy. They want us to do the same thing with our symptoms and earlier than we might imagine. So anywhere in the 40s, you might be part of that menopause transition or entering it. So start cluing into your mood, to your sleep, to how your body feels. Even joint pain can be a symptom of menopause and perimenopause. And so, what your doctor really wants is for you to come with a list of the symptoms you might be dealing with, so that she or he can help you put together the pieces of the stage you're in.
Yeah, I have a really great app that tracks my cycle, and there is a section where you can add symptoms in there. So, it's hard to remember. We are already like going through brain fog. So, it's hard to remember everything, but you can actually enter things when you're like, I've actually had a change of symptoms over this past year, and I'm now getting pre-cycle headaches. And it's like, that's something that I've never experienced before. And so that's something that I'm like, okay, that's not just like a fluke. I'm noticing it's been months of this. Now it's like kind of a cycle that it's happening. And so that is something I'm sure what you're talking about. That would be something good to make a note of.
Totally. Things like, even your cycle can get a little wonky, right? You can bleed for way longer than the 5 to 7 days during that transition, the menopause transition. And, taking detailed notes on it can help you look at trends. And again, also really just bring, what I do when I go to the doctor is I bring my reporter's notebook. And it's not only so that I can take notes when I'm coming away from that appointment, but I bring information to my doctor. And that was a big shift after working on this book. I used to show up and just be like, I'm in good hands. I can just trust that everything's going to get covered. And now I'm a lot more proactive. And, my doctors actually, they're here for it. They love it. Like I had a new appointment with a primary care physician, a brand new doctor to me when I was done reporting this book. And I feel like her eyes started to sparkle because we were having like a really great conversation. And I came to the table prepared to talk about my health, prepared to talk about my personal history, medical history, my family medical history. I had symptoms listed. I organized them in order of priority for me so that, like, what health journalists say is, or journalists in general, don't bury the lead. Start with what's most important. And I showed her my full list. And then I said, here's what I think is most important. What do you think? And she actually said to me, like, wow, this was a fun appointment because you came prepared, you came with knowledge, and it helped us cover more ground. And so I think definitely women in the midlife transition, in the midlife period, where a lot of things are happening and changing, that's really great advice that our doctors will love as well.
I love that. That's great. Like thinking about how we can come prepared to our meetings to get the most out of it so that they can, well, it's not a meeting, it's a doctor visit, but like so they can come and help us as much as they can.
Yeah, and you know what? You can treat it as a meeting. It really is. Like I treat a lot of my doctor visits as interviews with experts, and I don't think that's a bad thing. You know, when you think about it, we are enlisting the help of someone else to care for us, and we have choice. If we're lucky, we have some choice in who we go to for that help. And you want to make sure you have a good relationship so that you can do what doctors call shared decision making. You know, it's one of the old rules of women's health is to just, transfer over all my power. You tell me what to do. Mm-mm. Like, I came across a quote recently that I loved, which is that doctors know bodies, but we know our bodies.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something really powerful there. If we start to clue into our bodies, track our symptoms, really ask ourselves, like, how do you feel today? We can stop missing some of those things that, we might just otherwise steamroll through.
Yeah, I know. And that just is a good reminder for us to all be paying attention to our bodies because that's so easy to just, we're so busy. It's like, oh, I'm just going to ignore that thing that's going on. And I think this is just another reminder how powerful it is to be in tune with yourself and with your body because, we're separate sometimes from our mind and our body. And that's one thing that everybody talks about is like getting that connected. You did mention in the beginning, we historically have been more focus on the you called it the bikini medicine. Like I would love to talk about some of the things that you found for those other things, those other parts of our body that are really important. You mentioned our brain. I mean, let's start there. Our brain health is so important. It's so important. And now we're learning that, what we can do, what we shouldn't do about our brains for our brains so that we're as healthy as we can because there's a lot of different issues going on with people and disease that affects the brain. Share what you learned so that we can try to prevent some of those diseases.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, when it comes to brain health, we need to know that as women, we are more susceptible to certain, diseases such as Alzheimer's disease, which is the biggie that I think feels the scariest, right? Because it's a life-altering disease. And we are finally starting to understand some of the why. Maria Shriver, who asked me to write this book, is really at the forefront of advocacy in the women's brain health space. Her dad passed away with Alzheimer's disease. She was First Lady of California at the time. And she said, mostly women were coming up to her saying, that was my mom passed away from Alzheimer's. My sister has Alzheimer's. It was all women. And she started asking doctors, why? Why is it more women than men coming to me saying there's Alzheimer's all throughout my family? And they didn't know. And so thankfully, Maria Shriver funded a lot of the research. She founded the Women's Alzheimer's Movement. We now know a lot more. There's still a lot more to learn, but I think that's first and foremost, understand that as a woman, you are at more risk. But don't let it be something that cripples you. There is a lot we can do when it comes to protecting our brain from cognitive decline and different cognitive diseases. And at the top of that list is exercise. So that is one thing that I really took away from all of my reporting, which is exercise is no joke. It is probably like if it came in a pill, everybody would say, take this pill, which is move your body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I love that.
I think, another thing you brought up is the heart. And what we are learning is that women's hearts are different than male hearts, and our heart attack symptoms show up differently,
Yeah.
So what's fascinating is if you Google heart attack symptom or symptoms, you usually, and if you click on the images button to kind of see what images come, it's always men. And it's like the grabbing the arm, crippling chest pain. For women, the symptoms are a lot more subtle. And so knowing this can help us stay clued into this. It can be as simple as like, I just feel like not like myself for a few days, And again, not to say like that can also be just a common symptom that we can all experience, but knowing it can also help us clue in to be like, but this feels different than just feeling off. I have this gut feeling that something's not right. Knowing that can help us make the call to a doctor to say, look, this is what's going on. I know that women's, symptoms, present differently than men's. I'd like you to see me so we can be more
Mm.
proactive.
Yes, I feel like that happens, and I know personally women that it's happened to where they kind of brushed it off and then had a heart attack. And yeah, not good outcomes. And I think it's really easy, like you said something about, the generation that we are in, and how it's kind of like just get through it, like push on, move forward. But knowing these things is so important because then you are able to connect like, okay, this isn't a time where I need to push through. It's an area where I need to call a doctor or I need to go to the hospital.
Totally. And even on the heart health front, one of the things that shocked me in reporting this book is that our awareness, women's awareness that heart disease is our number one killer as women. 1 in 3 women will die of heart disease.
Mm.
Awareness of this fact has actually gone down in recent years. And so we need to do all that we can to be talking about this. It's like really important for us to stay on top of our breast cancer screenings and get our annual mammograms and look at our lifetime risk of breast cancer. So we make sure we're getting the appropriate screenings. We need to stay on top of that colonoscopy. Get it once you're 45, sign up, make the appointment. These are all really, really important. And we can't forget about our hearts. We can't think that heart disease is this disease that maybe is going to happen to us when we're in our 80s. Like, we need to focus on it now.
Yeah, and I think that description that you had about the man with like holding his arm and everything, it's the image that I come up when I think of a heart attack as well. It's just what we've seen for so long. So I want to ask about, let's get more into the book because you said this is about the new rules and the old rules that we've been told for so long. I feel like that could be one with the heart and the women, and how knowing that this is a huge problem for women health wise and that we need to know more about it. So we need to know if something happens to us, what we can do about it. But can you tell us a little bit more about some of the other rules and the new rules versus what we've been told that is just not accurate anymore?
Yeah. I mean, how long do you have? I feel like, this book it's a hefty book and it is filled. And in every aspect of our health, there are new rules we need to follow, right? I think overall, a big new rule is that we have to be our own best healthcare advocates, right?
Mm.
It's like no more do we go and we hand over our power to the expert who knows more. We have to advocate for ourselves. And especially in this system where our doctor visits are getting shorter, not because our doctors want to spend less time with us, but because they're under certain pressures and quotas they have to meet, right? And so we really have to make the most of those appointments. We really have to come prepared to our doctor visits and empower ourselves with knowledge to help us take care of ourselves. So be your own best health advocate. I think another big new rule of women's health is, again, we talked about this a little, but to show up to your doctor's visits prepared, right? Like come with your notebook, come with your family medical history, with your personal medical history, so that you really can make sure that your the whole view of you is being looked at. I think another new rule is to not ignore our own symptoms, to believe our own stories, right? I think about myself years, even though I'm a health journalist and have written stories about women's health for 20 years now. Ignoring my own symptoms, I'm just chalking it up to like, maybe it's just perimenopause. It's okay. It's like a crime scene for a couple days every month. And it turns out I had a uterus full of fibroids, every type you can have, every place they can be. And it was causing me to be anemic and really taking down my quality of life. Now, almost a year post-op, I feel like a new person. And I think, gosh, I wish I didn't ignore my own body for so long. We have to honor ourselves and what we're going through.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
then,
go ahead.
well, just a few more like little, like not that they're little, but like a few little ones to give you a teaser of what's in the book. It's like something else that blew my mind when I interviewed a number of female urologists, which I think is interesting because they treat men and women. So they see the discrepancy in how we treat men versus women in this country. And, old rules like you have to pee after sex all the time. to prevent urinary tract infections. Not so much, actually. And in fact, what they say is that it actually, that old advice distracts us from the real solution to recurrent urinary tract infections, which is local vaginal estrogen. I think for a while women were like, it was presented as a hygiene thing, like, oh, you're not peeing after sex, or you're wiping the wrong direction, and that's why you're getting recurrent UTIs. And it's like, no, like your anatomy might just be different. And I think things like that, we're finally starting to medicine is getting more progressive, and I think that is great for all of us.
Yes, I absolutely. And then being able to come out and say debunk some of these things are going to be it's huge. So you mentioned the immune system. Was there anything that you found surprising about the immune system and women in particular? Because that's also a very hot topic now. I think it's talked about more than ever. And like we talk about how there's leaky gut and people are really suffering with their gut health, and that's coming out in all different ways, with your skin, with the way that you get sick so many times, and people have so many digestive issues because of it. So was there anything that you found interesting or surprising when it comes to the immune system?
Yeah, I think the thing that comes to mind first is for women to know that autoimmune disease is just something that we deal with way more than our male counterparts. And we're still trying to unpack all of the reasons why. The research hasn't fully been done to understand why. I'm pretty sure the stat is like 80% of autoimmune disease happens to women. And
Wow.
so that's pretty remarkable, and I think, there's some theories, hormones play a role, even with pregnancy, how the female immune system has to be so tuned in to not reject a fetus, right? Because when you think about it, that is material from a foreign body growing inside of you, right? And so there are a lot of different hormonal transitions that we go through where the immune system has to be very finely tuned to work with that. And so, yeah, when I finished the immune health chapter, I had so much more respect for my body and the little army of immune cells I have keeping me healthy, because it really is remarkable what the immune system does. And it's sort of in that way too, you're kind of like, well, I guess because of how, like, the intricacy of the job it has to do, it's no wonder things can go awry sometimes, And so that was interesting. And I think also with the immune system, I really double down on those lifestyle habits now that we've heard a million times before, to the point where maybe our eyes roll and we're like, don't tell me to exercise more and eat, anti-inflammatory foods and sleep, and, it all works. I'm convinced more than ever that these doubling down on these healthy lifestyle habits really do help across the specialties, and immune health for sure is one of those.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a sexy topic, and people love, I think, when you're suffering, they're like, well, what's the one thing I can do? What's that magic pill that I can take? But really, after all the things that you've seen, it's like, it really is, let's get our nutrition dialed in, let's exercise. I love what you said about exercise earlier when it came to brain health, because that was like one of the first things that you said for brain health. And I don't think maybe a lot of people would put two and two together. Maybe they would say, oh, eat salmon, or, something, of course, which is great, but how important the fitness component is with our health and just literally every single way. It's like, it's crazy. Like every time I read a study or something when it comes to our health, I'm like, it's always exercise. It's always there. Was there like a specific example of what type of exercise, or was it just like, you found let's just move our bodies?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And there's an entire section on exercise in this book because I felt really passionate about breaking it down. What do we know for women specifically in terms of how we can move our bodies for optimal health? And so I interviewed a number of exercise physiologists and doctors and researchers for this chapter. And what I walked away from were some overarching themes, which is the first one, which we're all talking about more now, thankfully, is that we have to be lifting weights. So I was of the generation where I was sweating it out on the elliptical machine when all the boys were in the weight room, and I was a little intimidated to go in there and lift weights. And man, if I could turn back time, I would tell my 20-year-old self, get in there, get over it and go lift some weights, because your 20s and your 30s, you're still laying down bone. And if you're exercising, if you're lifting weights, you are building muscle that's pulling on that bone in the way that is going to help produce stronger bones that will pay off later on. That said, it's never too late, right? And so I lift weights now, and I prioritize lifting weights. That said, in the focus that we're having right now on the importance of strength training, we don't want to lose sight of the fact that cardio is still important. We still need to be working our hearts. And as a great cardiologist I interviewed said, look, like the heart is a muscle, and all those little arteries and ventricles and that are feeding our heart blood, they squeeze, they go out and in and out and in. And when we pump our heart, those arteries and those blood vessels stay pliable. And that's what we want. We don't want them to get stiff, because when they're stiff, that's when plaque, can form. And that's the opposite of what we want. And so that zone 2 cardio, where you're going for a walk with a girlfriend or you're taking a walk, really, really important, in addition to, your sprint interval training that we've also been told is really important, especially in midlife, in addition to the lifting weights. The other big aha in the exercise chapter for me is that women in particular need to fuel our workouts. So years ago, I kind of thought, and was probably told, it was in the zeitgeist, like, fast before your workout, right? You'll burn more fat if you're working out on an empty stomach. And the opposite is true for women in particular. Men actually do a lot better on fasted workouts, but for women, and it's not like some big meal you need before you work out, but like a little bit of yogurt with a little bit of granola, or a cracker with a little bit of turkey. You want just a little bit of carbohydrate, protein, and a healthy fat to fuel that workout. You'll get a better workout, and you won't put your body through as much stress, which means you'll recover faster and you'll be better able to hit your workout the next day.
I love that example, because that's another perfect example of how we are told the same things as men, and especially with fasting. I mean, we've talked about this on my podcast before, of how a lot of those studies, I think most of those studies that said you should fast, especially or before a workout or whatever, they were really dedicated for men.
Yeah. They were studies on men, for men, and we were extrapolating the information for us. And we know more now, thankfully.
Yes, I know. And I love that. I love that we're talking about this, because it's like there's so much information out there and I think like old habits die hard. If it's so ingrained in us, like we've been doing this, if you've been kind of doing the same thing since the 90s or whenever, when you were younger, it's hard to switch that off. Even if you hear new information, it's nice that you have it in a book where you have real experts that are there saying, no, this is like not just a new trend. This is data. This is scientific, so that you can feel more confident about taking that advice.
Yeah, as a health journalist, that's what I do. That's what I've been trained to do, which is to take something we're all talking about or that there's interest in, and find out who is the leading mind in that field, and then talk to that person so that I can then understand, and not only that one person, but multiple people, to make sure there's a consensus, and then translate the information so that it makes sense for all of us. Because doctors, researchers, brilliant minds, that sometimes they will go off on one and you're like, whoa, I need a medical degree to understand what you're talking about here. And so what I really tried to do is talk to the experts about these multiple topics that women are interested in when it comes to optimizing how we feel, and really translating the complex medical stuff into what feels like actionable steps we can all take in our own lives.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the tips that you gave us for when you are going to see your doctor. I love that you said, we could treat this as a meeting, and you want to be prepared for meetings. But tell us if you have any advice for our listeners as to finding the type of doctor who's willing to do that with you, because I'm sure I've had bad experiences with doctors that I've had to switch because I felt like they weren't listening to me. And it was like very rushed. And I know they have less time than ever, but what would you say when somebody's looking for someone, a new doctor, to share, like, okay, I'm ready to talk about what's going on with me and I want some real answers here?
Yeah, I think as much as you can do a little bit of sourcing before you make that appointment. So we all have friends and relatives, and
Mm-hmm.
and really rely on those people who live in your area and say, I'm looking for a new primary care physician or a new gynecologist. Do you have anyone you love? I saw a new primary care physician whose eyes started sparkling, and I've recommended her to like everyone I know because she's a tremendous doctor. My hope is that everybody has an experience like that in the doctor's office. And so lean on your people, find out who they really like. I think then you can find out a lot from make the call you make to make that initial appointment too. There's an entire section in the nutrition chapter actually on weight inclusivity. And I've this one blew me away and opened my eyes because, you know, for a lot of people living in larger bodies, that weight can feel like always it's the focus of the doctor visit. And that is really unfortunate because there's so many other aspects of health that should and need to be tackled in those appointments. And so one of the tips, and I think it applies for all of us, is ask when you're calling, does your office, are you a weight inclusive practice? How do your physicians, clinicians, what's their approach to that? And for whatever issue you're going through, you might ask that question. I'm looking for a practice that does X, Y, and Z, and ask the office staff. You might not get anywhere, but you might. And so it's worth the ask. And then I think finally, when you're in that first appointment, as hard as it is, because there really is a power differential, we're here in the flimsy gown, right? And they're there with their medical degree behind them, and it can feel really intimidating. I think as much as we can slow everything down, really climb into our bodies, feel embodied, show up feeling prepared, and then just like take the deep breaths and remind yourself, like, I know my body and I can talk about my body and my symptoms from a place of confidence. And then clue into what the response is. And if you feel like you're getting dismissed or you're getting the brush off or you're not being believed, if at all possible, you try to find a new provider.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes you have to go through a few before you find the one that works for you. And that's okay because you want to be comfortable. You want to feel listened to. I mean, I had one experience that was so terrible that I was like, I just threw my hands up. I'm like, I don't even know if I want to go back to any doctors. Like, it was so bad.
Yeah.
But like what you said, trying to find the people in your network that have a really good experience and a really good doctor that they can share with you. I think that's so important. That's such good advice.
Yeah. And I think also, like, don't be afraid to bring an advocate with you. Don't be afraid to see if your mom or your sister or your best friend or your husband or your child, a grown child will come with you to an appointment, because sometimes that makes all the difference, right? Especially if we get into not just the regular checkups, but the times that we're seeing specialists because something might be really wrong. It can feel so overwhelming. And having someone next to you who can be taking notes, who can be making sure that you're tackling all the questions you have. That was another big takeaway from interviewing all of the doctors that I did for this book. They welcome that. They want to make sure you walk away feeling like, if they're good, they want to make sure you walk away feeling like you've been helped.
Oh, yeah. And I can tell you, I've left appointments going, what did they say? Like, I completely forgot everything that I was supposed to do. And I'm like, okay, yeah, it would have been nice if I wrote that down or had a friend to write that down with me. I think that's really great. So as we close this conversation, tell us about the woman that you want to get this book. Like, tell us who you think would benefit from reading this book and learning about how things have changed and really want to focus on how they can improve their health as women. Tell us who you would like to see get this book.
Yeah, I mean, this book, my goal is that women will feel called to buy this book, and then they'll want to get it for their mom. and their sister and their daughter, because really, it does span the decades. There is something in here for women from their 20s through their 80s. I had a friend recently say, it feels like a coffee table book. The cover's really pretty. It would be fun to just leave this on the coffee table, because not only would it be easy access, so like if I have a question, I can reference it, but also the men in our lives will see it, and pick it up. And I feel like that's a hidden gift of this book. It's like I've given this book to my husband, and I had him read the breast health chapter before my last mammogram, because usually I have to go back for a follow-up. I have dense breasts, and so it usually means a follow-up sonogram, and I always get stressed out about it. No, even though I have the knowledge that like it's probably nothing, it's anxiety inducing, right? And so don't we want the men in our lives to support us, right? And so this book really is for women, but I think it's for men too, the men who love us, to have them be as knowledgeable as we are to help support us. So that's the goal, it's really so that we can support ourselves, support the women in our lives, and just, really, again, feel like we have the tools we need to advocate for ourselves.
I think it's really important for moms with girls to have this information, because I can tell you now that we know things are changing since we were kids, when, maybe our parents didn't have this information, but what a gift to give to your kids, your girls, that, okay, this is something that I didn't know about when I was your age. And now they can help their daughters so much better by knowing the things that we didn't know when we were kids, or that our parents may not have known when we were kids.
Totally. I mean, you can probably relate to this as a woman in her, 40s. How have we spent 40 years on this planet and not know as much as we don't know, like about our bodies? We don't get the lessons, right? We don't get a really good anatomy lesson. We don't get a really great lesson on puberty. We don't even really get great lessons on sex. And I think it's on us then to say, okay, how can we educate ourselves? And then sure, daughters, nieces, I have the book is dedicated to my 3 nieces. And in so many points, it really felt like as I was writing a love letter to them, because it just feels like, gosh, you can know more now. You can know more, and it can help you feel empowered and confident when you make decisions that help your health, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And keep you healthy and keep you living. The goal is not just to live a long life, but a life where we are mobile and our brains are functioning. I know a lot of people that have lived a long life, but the quality of life wasn't there. And so that is what we're trying to make sure that we can do. With you talk about, the preventative things, the things that we can add in, like exercise and building muscle. So this has been amazing. Tell everybody where they can get your book, first of all, and where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find a little more about me and buy my book, and just learn a little bit more about the process that went into writing this book at newrulesofwomenshealth.com. And you can buy the book anywhere books are sold, and I'm so thrilled to be able to talk about it. It's a wild feeling to work on something for 3 years, writing, rewriting, hiring professional fact checkers to make sure it's all right, and now having it in the world is so exciting.
Well, congratulations. I'll make sure to link that website in the show notes. And thank you so much for being here. It was wonderful talking to you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Please subscribe and review so we can reach more people who want to learn to glow alongside us. See you next time.